You've been told that freedom from suffering comes from achieving more, from having everything figured out, from constantly moving forward. But if that were true, why do so many people who seem to have it all still feel trapped by their own thoughts, restless, endlessly chasing something that always slips away? Why does the weight of your mind still pull you down, no matter how much you accomplish? The truth is, suffering isn't something you conquer by doing more. It's something you free yourself from by quieting your mind. Buddhism teaches us that when you quiet the mind, suffering loses its power. The endless chatter, the constant overthinking, the attachments that keep you stuck, these begin to fade, and with them, so does the suffering. Tonight, as you listen to these lessons, something will shift inside you. The mental noise will start to settle. You'll feel the weight lift from your shoulders, as if the storm inside is finally passing. When you wake up tomorrow, you'll feel different, stronger, lighter, and no longer bound by negative thoughts. This isn't just another moment of quiet. It's the beginning of your liberation from suffering. Are you ready to let go? Let's begin. You've been taught that success and progress are born from constant action, that the busier you are, the more you achieve, the happier and more fulfilled you'll become. But if you look closely, you'll see that this constant doing doesn't always bring peace or happiness. In fact, it often does the opposite. The more you strive, the more the mind races, caught in a cycle of overthinking and never feeling truly settled. This is the paradox of modern life. The more we try to control, the more we lose control. But there's another way, one that's been hidden for centuries. It's the art of non-doing, a core practice in Buddhism that teaches us to stop struggling, to stop forcing the mind into constant action. When you let go of the need to do, to strive, and simply be, you create space for something profound to unfold. In that space, suffering begins to lose its grip. Non-doing isn't about being passive or lazy. It's about freeing yourself from the tyranny of your own mind. When you stop constantly chasing thoughts, goals, and outcomes, the mind calms. This simple shift creates room for peace to enter, and with peace comes the possibility of true liberation from suffering. It's a practice that's subtle but powerful, teaching us to trust that by doing less, we actually accomplish more. By allowing things to unfold naturally, we find clarity, joy, and relief from the constant mental noise. We live in a world that glorifies doing. We're constantly told that to be worthy, to be successful, we need to keep moving, keep achieving, keep busy. But what if this endless striving is exactly what keeps you stuck in a cycle of dissatisfaction? The more you try to solve problems with more thinking, more action, the more you create new problems for yourself. The mind becomes a trap, endlessly spinning thoughts, judgments, and desires, but never finding satisfaction. In Buddhism, there's a simple truth that can free us. Peace doesn't come from doing. It comes from being. It comes from quieting the mind, from releasing the pressure to constantly think and act. When you practice non-doing, you allow your mind to rest. You stop feeding it with more problems, more worries, more goals to chase. Instead, you simply let go and allow life to flow without interference. The beauty of non-doing is that it doesn't require effort or struggle. It's not about forcing yourself to stop thinking or trying to control your thoughts. It's about noticing the constant churn of the mind and choosing not to engage with it. It's about observing your thoughts without attachment, without judgment, and letting them come and go like clouds drifting across the sky. You don't need to push them away, but you also don't need to hold on to them. This is the practice of non-doing. The first step in embracing non-doing is recognizing the endless activity of the mind. The mind is always busy, always planning, worrying, analyzing, judging. It's as if it's afraid to stop. But when you realize this, when you see the mind for what it truly is, just a stream of thoughts that come and go, you begin to free yourself from its control. You realize that you don't have to engage with every thought that comes to your mind. You can let them pass by without getting caught in them. In Buddhist practice, this is called mindfulness, the ability to observe the mind without becoming entangled in it. When you practice mindfulness, you're not trying to control your thoughts or stop them from arising. You're simply noticing them without judgment, without trying to change them. This non-judgmental awareness allows the mind to settle and quiet. It's like a snow globe. When it's shaken up, the snow swirls and everything is chaotic. But when you stop shaking it, the snow settles and the clarity returns. Non-doing also teaches us to trust in the natural flow of life. We don't need to force things to happen. Life will unfold as it is meant to, and the more we let go of our need to control or manipulate, the more we can experience life as it truly is. This doesn't mean we stop acting altogether. It means we act without attachment, without clinging to outcomes, without striving for perfection. It's about letting go of the desire to control and simply allowing things to be as they are. When we stop fighting with life, we begin to see the beauty in the present moment. Non-doing opens up space for gratitude, for appreciation of what is already here. The mind isn't focused on what's missing or what's wrong. It's simply experiencing the richness of the present moment. This is where peace and happiness reside, not in the future, not in the past, but in the here and now. One of the key teachings of Buddhism is that suffering arises from attachment. We become attached to our thoughts, our desires, our identities, and when those things don't go the way we expect, we suffer. But non-doing teaches us to let go of attachment. When we stop clinging to the need to control our thoughts, our emotions, or the world around us, we begin to experience freedom. We don't need to be attached to anything because we realize that everything is temporary, everything is constantly changing. There's no need to hold on so tightly. This practice of non-doing also leads to a deep sense of inner peace. When we stop filling our minds with noise, we create space for something deeper, something that's always been there, but we often overlook. It's the peace that comes from accepting things as they are, without the need to change them. It's the peace that comes from understanding that you don't have to fix everything, you don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to control every outcome. You can simply be, and in that being, you find the peace you've been searching for. It's important to note that non-doing is not about escaping life or avoiding responsibility. It's not about retreating from the world or becoming passive. It's about letting go of unnecessary mental activity, letting go of the pressure to constantly do and achieve. It's about finding balance and wisdom in the midst of life's challenges. When you practice non-doing, you don't stop engaging with the world. You simply engage with less attachment, less effort, and less striving. You approach life with a sense of calm and presence, knowing that you are enough just as you are, and that everything will unfold as it should. One of the most powerful aspects of non-doing is that it helps you break free from the cycle of stress and anxiety. In today's world, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the demands of life, by the constant need to achieve, to prove yourself, to stay ahead. But non-doing offers an antidote to this anxiety. It teaches you that you don't have to constantly prove yourself, you don't have to be perfect. You can simply be present without the need for constant effort. This is where true freedom lies, not in doing more, but in letting go. As you begin to practice non-doing, you'll notice subtle shifts in your life. You may feel less anxious, less rushed, less burdened by the weight of expectations. You may start to feel more connected to yourself, to others, and to the world around you. This is the power of non-doing. It helps you reconnect with the simplicity of life, the joy of being, and the freedom that comes when you stop trying to force things into place. In the stillness created by non-doing, you'll find that your mind becomes clearer, your emotions become more balanced, and your life becomes more peaceful. You'll no longer be at the mercy of your thoughts, but instead, you'll be able to observe them without getting caught up in them. This shift in perspective is transformative. It's not about changing your life externally, it's about changing the way you relate to your mind and to the world. And in that shift, you'll find that suffering has less and less power over you. So, take a moment to step back. Let go of the pressure to do, to achieve, to constantly be on the move. Embrace the art of non-doing and watch as your mind begins to quiet, your heart begins to settle, and your life begins to unfold with a sense of ease and peace. When you stop fighting with yourself, you'll find that peace and freedom were always within you, waiting for you to stop and listen. As we've just explored, the mind's constant chatter often keeps us trapped, preventing us from experiencing true peace. The relentless noise of thoughts, worries, judgments, and desires can become so overwhelming that we forget who we are beyond all that mental activity. But what happens when you step back and stop identifying with the noise? What happens when you break free from the patterns that have defined your thinking for so long? The answer is liberation. When we begin to recognize that we are not our thoughts, the power they hold over us starts to dissipate. This shift is subtle, yet profound. It's like turning down the volume on a speaker you've had blasting in your ear for years. Suddenly the silence becomes more noticeable, more inviting. In that silence, something new unfolds, a freedom that goes beyond just the absence of noise. It's a freedom that allows you to live without the mental burdens that have been weighing you down for so long. For so long, you may have believed that your thoughts were who you are, that they defined your identity. But the truth is, thoughts are just passing phenomena. They don't define you. They come and go without permanence, and they don't have to dictate how you experience life. The mind has a tendency to convince us that we are the stories it creates. The voice in your head is not the true essence of who you are. It's just a part of your mind trying to make sense of the world. When you stop identifying with that voice, something shifts. The mind becomes less of a controlling force and more of an instrument that you can observe rather than be ruled by. The first step to true liberation is recognizing the noise for what it is. We've all heard the saying, "You are not your thoughts." But how often do we really understand the meaning of that statement? Thoughts are just transient ideas. They don't have lasting power unless we give them significance. By learning to observe the thoughts that arise, without attaching labels or judgments to them, we create distance between our true selves and the noise of the mind. This doesn't mean you try to stop thinking or force yourself to stop hearing the voice in your head. It means learning to step back from it, to watch it without getting involved. This shift from identification to observation is the key to liberation. It's in this space of detachment that the mind's constant chatter begins to lose its grip. When you stop believing every thought, you stop giving them the power to define you. You stop letting them create suffering in your life. This practice isn't about silencing the mind completely, it's about transforming your relationship with it. When you stop identifying with the chatter, you become the observer, not the participant. You no longer become swept away in the current of thoughts. Instead, you sit back and witness them as they arise and pass, like clouds drifting through the sky. They're no longer your enemy. They're simply what they are, transient, ever-changing, and without true substance. One of the most liberating aspects of this shift is the realization that your thoughts don't control you. For years, you may have felt as though your thoughts were an inescapable part of your being, and that to be a good person or a right person, you needed to control them. But when you stop identifying with your thoughts, you realize that you are so much more than what your mind tells you. This realization opens up a new realm of freedom. Freedom from the constant judgment, from the inner critic that has been feeding you negativity for years. When the mind's chatter no longer controls you, you can begin to experience the world with fresh eyes. You no longer get caught up in the cycle of overthinking. You no longer feel like a prisoner of your own mental patterns. Instead, you become open to the present moment. You become present with yourself and the world around you, without the weight of mental baggage. It's like lifting a heavy burden that you didn't even know you were carrying. You start to feel lighter, freer, more at ease with everything around you. True freedom from suffering comes when you let go of your need to control the flow of your thoughts. It's not about stopping thoughts or forcing them away. It's about allowing them to come and go without getting attached to them. You begin to see that thoughts are not the enemy. The attachment to them is what creates suffering. When you stop attaching to them, the suffering they create starts to dissolve. Liberation is not an end goal, it's a process. It's the ongoing act of letting go, of detaching from the mind's noise. As you practice this over time, the mind becomes quieter, and the space between thoughts becomes more noticeable. This space is where true peace resides. It's in this space that you can experience life as it truly is, without the filters of your past, without the judgments of your mind. This is where you can start to see the world with clarity, without the veil of constant mental activity clouding your vision. One powerful tool in this process of liberation is mindfulness. Mindfulness allows you to observe your thoughts without getting attached to them. It's not about controlling your thoughts, but about observing them without judgment. This practice helps you create the space between your thoughts, allowing you to see them clearly. When you stop reacting to your thoughts, you give them less power. The more you practice mindfulness, the more you can simply watch the thoughts come and go without being affected by them. The more you experience this freedom, the more you realize that you don't need to hold on to thoughts. You don't need to label them or make them mean something about you. You can simply let them pass. When you let go of your identification with thoughts, you can begin to experience life as it truly is, without the constant interference of your own mind. This is where true freedom from suffering lies, not in silencing the mind, but in observing it without attachment. As you deepen your practice, you may notice that your sense of self begins to shift. You start to realize that you are not the sum of your thoughts, emotions, or experiences. These are simply aspects of your mind, not your true self. The true you is the observer, the one who is aware of these thoughts and experiences, but not defined by them. This is where true liberation lies. When you recognize that you are not the thoughts that pass through your mind, but the awareness that observes them. In this liberation, you find a new way of being in the world. You stop trying to control your mind, and instead, you allow it to be what it is. You let go of the need for approval, for validation, for external success. You stop identifying with the thoughts that tell you who you should be, and instead embrace who you truly are. In doing so, you stop suffering. You stop the constant cycle of wanting, judging, and striving. You become free, not because the mind is silent, but because you are no longer at its mercy. When you stop identifying with the mind's noise, you open up a whole new world of possibility. You begin to live with clarity, with peace, and with the freedom that comes from knowing that your thoughts are just passing phenomena, not the essence of who you are. This is the liberation that comes when you free yourself from the mind's chatter. It's the freedom to live in the present moment, to be at peace with yourself, and to experience life without the constant interference of overthinking. In this space, you can truly let go of suffering because you no longer cling to the thoughts that create it. This liberation doesn't happen overnight, but with consistent practice, it becomes more and more natural. The more you detach from the thoughts that once defined you, the more you experience freedom. The more you observe your thoughts without attachment, the more you realize that you don't need them to define who you are. This is where true liberation from suffering begins. The moment you stop identifying with the noise of the mind and begin to experience the world as it truly is. In that space of stillness, freedom blossoms and suffering loses its power. When you begin to free yourself from the constant noise of your mind, a surprising clarity begins to emerge. You start to notice things as they truly are, without the mental clutter distorting your view. And in this stillness, something profound becomes apparent. Nothing in life lasts forever. Everything changes. The people you meet, the situations you face, even your emotions, they are all in a state of constant flux. The impermanence of life is not a concept you need to understand intellectually. It is something you feel in your bones, something you experience firsthand when you allow your mind to quiet. When we are caught up in the constant barrage of thoughts, we cling to what we know. We cling to our possessions, our relationships, our successes, even our identity. But this attachment is the source of much of our suffering. We create expectations around things staying the same, and when they inevitably change, we feel pain. But when you embrace stillness, when you quiet the mind, you come face to face with a simple truth. Change is the only constant. And with this realization, you begin to let go of the grip that attachment holds on you. In stillness, you begin to see that everything you've been holding on to, everything you've been resisting, is just passing through. Your thoughts, your feelings, your desires, none of these are permanent. The joy you feel today may fade tomorrow, just as the pain you feel now may dissipate in time. This truth is both freeing and humbling. It teaches you that you don't have to cling to anything because nothing is meant to last. In this understanding, you find a deep sense of peace. When you stop fighting the inevitable ebb and flow of life, you start to experience it with ease. One of the most powerful aspects of stillness is that it allows you to witness the natural cycle of things, the rise and fall of thoughts, emotions, and experiences. This is the essence of impermanence. Life doesn't stop, and neither do your thoughts. But when you stop identifying with them, you allow them to come and go without clinging to them. The truth of impermanence is not something you need to force yourself to understand. It is something that becomes clear when you stop trying to control the flow of life and simply observe it as it is. It's easy to believe that the things we hold on to define us. We think that our possessions, our achievements, our relationships, and even our identity are what make us who we are. But in reality, these things are fleeting. We may try to hold on to them, but they will eventually change, slip away, or fade. And in that inevitable change, we often find suffering. The pain comes from our attachment, our belief that things should stay the same when, in fact, they never were meant to. By quieting the mind, you start to loosen the grip of attachment. You begin to see things for what they truly are, impermanent. This understanding doesn't bring sadness or despair. On the contrary, it brings freedom. You no longer need to hold on to things out of fear that they will be lost. Instead, you can appreciate them for what they are in the moment, knowing that just as they arrived, they too will pass. This understanding is liberating because it releases you from the burden of trying to control the uncontrollable. This recognition of impermanence doesn't just apply to external things, it applies to your internal world as well, the thoughts, emotions, and states of mind that you experience. One moment you might feel elation, the next, sadness. But neither of these emotions is permanent. When you are in a state of stillness, you see that emotions, like everything else, come and go. They are like waves on the surface of a vast ocean, rising and falling, but never lasting. When you realize that your emotions are impermanent, you no longer feel the need to attach to them. You stop identifying with them as though they define who you are. The sadness that once overwhelmed you no longer feels like a permanent part of your identity. The joy that once eluded you no longer feels impossible to hold on to. You start to experience life as it truly is, fluid, ever-changing, and full of possibilities. As your awareness deepens, the truth of impermanence becomes more clear in all areas of your life. You begin to let go of attachments to your past and your future. You start to see that the only moment that truly exists is the one right in front of you. This doesn't mean that you stop planning or stop learning from your experiences. It simply means that you no longer cling to the past, nor do you worry excessively about the future. You understand that life is constantly evolving, and that the only thing you can truly control is your response to it in the present moment. In letting go of your attachment to permanence, you also begin to experience the beauty of life's transience. When you stop trying to hold on to things, you open yourself up to experiencing life more fully, more deeply. You can appreciate the fleeting nature of moments, whether it's the warmth of the sun on your skin, the sound of laughter shared with a loved one, or the simple act of breathing. You realize that everything is precious precisely because it is temporary. It is in the very nature of impermanence that we find the opportunity to fully embrace each moment without fear of losing it. This understanding doesn't mean that life's changes are easy. It doesn't mean that we don't grieve when things end or feel sadness when we lose something we care about. But it does mean that we can experience these changes with a sense of acceptance and peace. We don't fight against the flow of life. Instead, we allow it to carry us, knowing that it is always in motion, always shifting, and that we are part of that flow. When you truly understand impermanence, you stop struggling with life's ups and downs. You stop labeling certain experiences as good or bad, because you understand that both are temporary. In this awareness, you start to experience a deeper sense of peace. The highs are no longer so exhilarating, and the lows no longer feel so crushing. Everything is balanced in the knowledge that it will all change. This allows you to experience life more fully, without the fear of losing what you have or the anxiety of what might come next. As you begin to see life's impermanence, you naturally begin to let go of attachment to your own sense of self. Just as you understand that your thoughts and emotions are impermanent, you begin to see that the self you have constructed, your identity, your roles, your accomplishments, is also temporary. This doesn't mean that you lose your sense of self, but rather you stop clinging to it. You realize that your identity is not fixed. It is as fluid and changeable as everything else in life. You stop fighting to maintain a certain image of yourself, and instead you allow yourself to be as you are in each moment, without the need to define or protect it. This shift in perspective opens up a new way of experiencing the world. You start to live with a sense of freedom, knowing that you are not bound by your past, your expectations, or your identity. You can move through life with a lightness, knowing that everything you encounter, both the joys and the struggles, is part of the natural flow of impermanence. And in that flow, you are free. The realization of impermanence isn't something that can be fully grasped with the mind alone. It's something that you feel, something that becomes apparent when you stop trying to control it. It is in stillness that the truth of impermanence becomes clear. As you let go of the need to grasp at life, you begin to experience its ever-changing beauty and its inherent freedom. This understanding of impermanence is not something that happens once and is then forgotten. It is an ongoing practice, a continual reminder that everything in life is fleeting, and that in this fleetingness there is freedom. The more you embrace the truth of impermanence, the less you are attached to the things, people, and identities that you once thought defined you. And the more you let go, the more you experience the peace that comes from accepting life as it is, a beautiful, ever-changing flow that you are a part of. In embracing the truth of impermanence, you also open yourself up to the beauty of each moment. You see the fleeting nature of everything and find joy in it. You stop holding on to what you think should be permanent and start appreciating life for what it is, impermanent, ever-changing, and full of endless possibilities. As you begin to recognize the impermanence of life, you realize that much of the suffering you've experienced stems from the endless chatter of your mind. The thoughts that swirl relentlessly about the past, the future, your fears, desires, and regrets create a storm inside that never seems to settle. Yet, as you dive deeper into this journey of self-awareness, you discover something transformative. Silence. Not the absence of sound, but the profound stillness of the mind. This is where true peace and clarity emerge. The mind's constant activity is like a never-ending treadmill. You feel compelled to keep running, yet you never reach your destination. The noise, the endless mental conversations, judgments, and worries create a barrier between you and the peace that is always available in the present moment. But once you stop identifying with the thoughts that arise, once you stop engaging with them, you begin to experience a space of pure stillness, a space that holds the key to freedom. The shift from thought-driven suffering to a profound sense of stillness is not an easy one. It requires patience, practice, and a willingness to detach from the mental noise that has dominated your life for so long. When the mind is in constant motion, it is nearly impossible to experience peace. The constant mental chatter clouds your ability to see clearly, and it becomes the source of most of your stress. But when you allow yourself to step back, to observe the thoughts without identifying with them, a new space opens up. This space is where true peace begins to flourish. In the stillness, you stop chasing thoughts and ideas. You stop clinging to the judgments that arise or the fears that try to pull you in. The mind no longer controls you. It simply becomes a tool, a part of you that can be observed from a distance. You begin to see that thoughts are just fleeting phenomena, like clouds passing through the sky. They arise, they linger for a moment, and then they vanish. This is the power of stillness. When you stop identifying with your thoughts, you stop suffering. As you become more attuned to this space of silence, you realize something important. Peace does not come from controlling the mind or forcing it into silence. It comes from allowing the mind to be exactly as it is, without judgment or attachment. This is a shift in perspective, a shift that allows you to experience life as it is, without the distortion of mental noise. True peace is not something you seek outside of yourself, but something that arises naturally when you stop fighting with your thoughts and simply allow them to be. This transition from thought to silence is like stepping into a room of calm after a lifetime of chaos. At first, it may feel unsettling. The mind has been so accustomed to filling every moment with thoughts and distractions, but as you sit in the stillness, you begin to notice a subtle shift. The mental noise starts to quiet down, and in its place, you find something deeper, something more profound. This is the true power of stillness. It is in the silence that insight emerges. The power of stillness lies in its ability to connect you with a deeper part of yourself, a part that is always present, yet often hidden behind the noise of the mind. When the mind is quiet, you no longer feel overwhelmed by external circumstances or your inner thoughts. You begin to experience life as it truly is, free from the filters of judgment and expectation. It's in this space of silence that clarity arises. You start to see the truth of who you are beyond the mental stories and labels. You begin to experience life with a fresh perspective, one that is not clouded by the past or driven by future concerns. It's important to understand that stillness does not mean the absence of thought, but rather the cessation of identifying with every thought that arises. The mind will always generate thoughts, but you no longer need to engage with them. You simply observe them, watch them come and go, without attaching any significance to them. This shift in perception is what allows you to experience true peace. The more you practice this detachment, the more you realize that the mind's chatter does not need to control you. In fact, you are not your thoughts at all. The more you sit in stillness, the more you begin to uncover the wisdom that lies beyond thought. It is in the absence of mental noise that you can hear the deeper truth of life. The insights that arise in this space are not born from the mind's constant analysis, but from a deeper awareness, a space where you are in tune with the present moment, with the flow of life itself. This is where true wisdom emerges, not from the intellect, but from the quiet awareness that transcends thought. When you allow yourself to be still, you start to realize that peace is not something you need to chase. It is already present within you, hidden beneath the layers of mental noise. It is always available, but you must make the choice to stop engaging with the thoughts that pull you away from it. This is the profound power of stillness. It is not something you acquire, but something you remember. When you stop identifying with your thoughts, peace emerges naturally. As you deepen your practice, you begin to notice how much the mind distracts you from the present moment. Thoughts constantly pull you away from what is happening right now, creating a sense of disconnection from yourself and the world around you. But when you quiet the mind, you become fully present. You stop living in the past or the future and begin to experience life in its purest form. The more you practice this, the more you realize that the present moment is all there is. When you are fully present, you are free from the mental suffering that arises from dwelling on past regrets or future anxieties. The true power of stillness is that it allows you to experience life without the filter of the mind. It is in this space that you can see things as they truly are, without judgment, without attachment. In this space, you begin to connect with your true self, the part of you that is beyond the mental stories and labels. This is where peace is found. It is not in the thoughts, not in the achievements, but in the stillness that exists beneath the surface of the mind. One of the most profound experiences that arise from stillness is the sense of clarity it brings. When the mind is quiet, the noise of the world fades, and you are able to see things clearly. You no longer see through the lens of your personal judgments or biases. Instead, you see things as they are, without distortion. This clarity allows you to make decisions with wisdom and insight, rather than being clouded by the mental noise that typically guides your actions. It's in this space of stillness that you can access your true inner wisdom, the wisdom that comes from being deeply in tune with yourself and the world around you. This transition from thought to silence is not something that happens overnight. It is a gradual process, one that requires patience and consistent practice. But with time, the more you practice sitting in stillness, the more natural it becomes. You begin to feel a deep sense of peace that permeates your entire being. The thoughts that once controlled you no longer hold the same power. You are free from the mental chatter that once created suffering. In its place, there is a deep sense of calm, a sense of knowing that comes from beyond thought. Stillness is not an escape from life, but a way to engage with life more fully. It is through the practice of quieting the mind that you can truly experience life in its fullness. When you are no longer lost in your thoughts, you can connect with the present moment in a deeper way. You can feel the richness of life without the interference of your mental distractions. This is the spiritual power of stillness. It allows you to be fully present, fully alive, and free from the suffering that arises when the mind is constantly in motion. The true power of stillness is its ability to lead you to insight. In the absence of thought, the truth of who you are begins to emerge. You realize that you are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your past or your future. You are the awareness that observes all of these things. And when you begin to experience life from this space, the suffering created by identification with thoughts falls away. You experience peace, not because you are trying to escape the noise of the world, but because you have learned to detach from the noise within. As you continue to practice, you begin to notice that this stillness extends beyond your meditation practice. You start to carry it with you throughout your daily life. You become more present, more aware, and more at peace. You no longer feel the need to react to every thought, every situation. Instead, you respond with wisdom and clarity, knowing that peace is always available to you in the stillness of the present moment. This journey from thought to silence is the path to true freedom. It's the path that leads you beyond the endless cycle of mental suffering and into the profound peace that exists when you stop identifying with your thoughts. The power of stillness is not something you achieve, it is something you remember. It is always there, beneath the surface, waiting for you to stop and listen. And in that silence, you will find the true peace that has been there all along. As you begin to settle into the stillness, a new realization begins to surface. The mind's constant activity, the endless stream of thoughts, no longer feels like an ordinary part of life. It becomes clear that this incessant mental chatter, often passed off as normal, is in fact a major source of your suffering. You may have accepted it as part of who you are, as something everyone experiences. But the truth is, this constant thinking is not only exhausting, it is a subtle yet powerful force that keeps you trapped in cycles of stress, anxiety, and confusion. In the quiet moments, you begin to notice the toll that the mind's ceaseless activity has taken on your well-being. Thoughts that loop and spiral, worries that constantly surface, judgments that arise without invitation, these all contribute to a state of inner turmoil. You might think that thinking is necessary, that your mind must stay busy to solve problems or make decisions. But in reality, much of the thinking you engage in is unproductive, automatic, and unnecessary. It's a habit that feeds your suffering, yet you rarely question it. The mind has become a machine, constantly running, and you've been caught up in it, thinking it is just part of living. But there's a deeper truth. You are not your thoughts. The hidden suffering caused by constant mental activity is often not recognized because it has become so ingrained in daily life. This mental activity can easily be mistaken for productivity or even normalcy, but when you step back and observe it, you begin to see how harmful it truly is. The mind's endless chatter doesn't lead to clarity or peace. Instead, it keeps you trapped in cycles of overthinking, worry, and fear. Even when you're not actively engaged in a specific thought, the background hum of mental noise is ever present, draining your energy and keeping you on edge. This constant mental activity is like a weight on your shoulders. It never really lets up. You may not even notice the strain it creates because you're so used to it, but it has a cumulative effect. The stress, the anxiety, the inability to relax, all of these are rooted in this incessant thinking. You might even believe that this mental activity is necessary to navigate the complexities of life. But what if it's not? What if the very act of letting go of this mental noise is the key to healing? The mind's constant activity is not only exhausting, it also distorts your perception of reality. When you're caught up in thoughts about the past or the future, you miss the present moment. You lose touch with the truth of what's happening right now. Instead of experiencing life directly, you're filtering it through the lens of your thoughts. You're interpreting everything based on past experiences or future expectations, and this interpretation often leads to stress and dissatisfaction. You're no longer seeing life as it is. You're seeing it through the lens of your constant mental narrative. The power of quieting the mind lies in its ability to help you step out of this mental maze. When the noise of your thoughts begins to subside, you regain access to the present moment. You stop trying to solve problems that aren't even here yet, and you stop reliving past events that only drain your energy. This shift in focus is a powerful form of healing. You begin to reconnect with yourself and the world around you in a way that is more grounded, more peaceful, and more authentic. The mind, in its restless state, constantly seeks to solve problems, to predict the future, to figure things out. But in this pursuit, it often creates problems that don't even exist. Thoughts spiral into worries about what could happen or what has happened, and in doing so, they only create more stress and anxiety. This is the hidden suffering. The mind is endlessly creating problems that keep you stuck in a loop of mental distress. The more you engage with these thoughts, the more you reinforce the cycle, making it harder to break free. The truth is that the constant need to think and analyze is not necessary for peace. When you quiet the mind, you stop engaging with these thought patterns. You give yourself space to simply be. This is where healing begins. By not feeding into the endless stream of thoughts, you start to break the cycle of mental suffering. You stop reacting to every thought that arises, and in doing so, you stop creating unnecessary stress and anxiety. This is not about suppressing thoughts, but about allowing them to come and go without attaching meaning or judgment to them. The relief that comes with quieting the mind is profound. You begin to realize how much mental energy has been consumed by the constant chatter. You also realize how much you've been missing by living in your head rather than experiencing life directly. The mind's incessant activity prevents you from truly experiencing the world around you. When you allow the mind to quiet, you reconnect with the simplicity of the present moment. You start to see things as they are, without the filters of judgment and expectation. This process of quieting the mind is not about avoiding life's challenges or pretending that problems don't exist. It's about creating space to approach those challenges with clarity and calm. When the mind is not consumed by endless thoughts, you can respond to life situations more effectively without being driven by fear or anxiety. You begin to approach challenges with a clear mind, grounded in the present moment, rather than being carried away by the constant tide of worry and overthinking. As you practice quieting the mind, you start to notice the patterns of thought that have been causing you suffering. You realize how often your mind runs on autopilot, replaying old stories, anticipating future problems, or judging yourself and others. These thoughts have become so familiar that you hardly notice them, but when you step back and observe them with awareness, you see how they fuel your suffering. The key to healing is not to try to suppress these thoughts, but to see them for what they are, just thoughts, with no inherent truth or power. You begin to recognize that you don't need to engage with them. By simply observing them without attachment, you allow them to lose their power. The healing process is gradual, but with consistent practice, you begin to notice a shift. The mental chatter starts to quiet, and in its place, you experience a sense of relief. The anxiety, the stress, the mental exhaustion, they all begin to subside. You start to feel more at peace, more centered, more present in your life. The mind's incessant activity no longer holds you captive. Instead, you reclaim your power and your peace. The more you practice quieting the mind, the more you experience the freedom that comes with it. This freedom is not about escaping reality or avoiding the challenges of life. It's about engaging with life from a place of peace and clarity. When you are no longer trapped by the constant noise of your thoughts, you can approach life with a sense of calm and presence. You can face difficulties with a clear mind, free from the emotional reactions and mental clutter that once clouded your judgment. The more you quiet the mind, the more you experience life as it truly is, without the distortion of fear, anxiety, and worry. The hidden suffering caused by constant mental activity is something many people don't recognize, simply because it has become so normalized. But as you begin to quiet your mind, you start to see how much of your suffering has been self-created. The thoughts you engage with, the worries you feed, the judgments you hold, they all contribute to your stress and unhappiness. But when you let go of them, when you stop feeding the mental noise, healing begins. Healing happens when you stop identifying with the thoughts that cause you suffering. You stop living in the future, the past, or the endless loop of self-criticism. You return to the present moment, where peace and clarity are always available. It's not about controlling the mind or stopping thoughts altogether. It's about creating space to simply observe them without attachment. When you do this, you free yourself from the suffering that the mind creates. You reclaim your peace, your energy, and your life. In the stillness, you find the freedom that comes from letting go of unnecessary thinking. You experience the world directly, without the constant interference of your own mind. This is where healing happens. The more you quiet your thoughts, the more you heal. And in that healing, you experience a profound sense of peace, clarity, and freedom that is always available, waiting for you to let go and simply be. As you begin to quiet the mind, something remarkable begins to happen. The noise of thoughts that once dominated your every waking moment starts to soften, and you become aware of a simple yet profound truth. You have been living in a world shaped by the past and the future. These two forces, ever present in the mind, have kept you trapped, pulling you away from the one place where peace resides, the present moment. The mind's fixation on what's already happened or what might happen has created a reality that is constantly in motion, never truly still. And in this constant motion, you have been left behind. But in stillness, there's an awakening. The present moment, which has always been here, is now within your reach. Much of our suffering comes from the mind's constant preoccupation with time. We replay past experiences, reliving old wounds, mistakes, or regrets. We worry about the future, imagining worst-case scenarios or anticipating what's to come. In doing so, we get lost in a mental loop, unable to fully engage with what's happening now. When your thoughts are always moving, always tied to time, it becomes impossible to experience the peace that exists in the present moment. This mental time travel, bouncing between past and future, keeps you from the only reality that is real, the now. The past is gone, and the future has not yet arrived. But the mind continues to carry them with you. Every moment is colored by the lens of past experiences and future expectations. The past might drag you down with feelings of guilt, regret, or sorrow. The future might keep you on edge, filled with anxiety, anticipation, or fear. In either case, you are not truly living in the present. The present moment is constantly slipping through your fingers because your mind is always somewhere else. But when you begin to still the mind, When you stop chasing after past memories and future projections, you create the space to experience life exactly as it is, right here and right now. The mind no longer dictates where you should be. You are no longer a prisoner of the thoughts that tie you to time. In stillness, you become aware that everything you need, everything you are searching for, is already here. The mind's fixation on past and future no longer controls you. You are free. This shift doesn't happen instantly. It takes practice, patience, and a willingness to confront the patterns of thought that have shaped your experience for so long. The mind has been conditioned to think in terms of time, past and future, and breaking free from this cycle requires a conscious effort to return to the present. It's not about rejecting the past or ignoring the future, but rather about recognizing that the present moment is where life is happening. The past is only a memory, and the future is a projection. Neither of them exists right now. Only the present is real, and when you return to it, you find that peace is no longer something you need to search for. It's already here. The practice of returning to the present moment requires letting go of the mental time travel that we so often engage in. It means stepping out of the stories the mind tells about what has been or what will be. These stories can hold you hostage, trapping you in cycles of regret or worry, preventing you from experiencing life as it is. But in the stillness, when you stop engaging with these mental stories, you start to realize how much time has been wasted in the past or future. You begin to see how your thoughts have kept you from being present, from truly living. When you learn to let go of the past, you stop being defined by it. The mistakes you made, the regrets you carry, they no longer have the power to shape your current experience. The present moment is a blank canvas, free from the weight of past actions. It doesn't matter what happened yesterday or last year. What matters is what you are doing right now. In stillness, you release the mental weight of the past, and you are free to create a new experience, one that is not limited by what has come before. The same applies to the future. When you stop constantly anticipating what's next, you begin to experience life more fully. The mind's tendency to project into the future, whether with excitement or anxiety, keeps you from being fully engaged with the present. You are so concerned with what might happen that you miss what is happening right now. But when you return to the present, you realize that the future is not something to fear or to chase. It is simply a continuation of the present. There is nothing to be anxious about, because all you need to do is be here, right now, with what is. In stillness, the concept of time itself begins to dissolve. When you stop being pulled between the past and the future, you begin to experience the timeless nature of the present moment. Time, as we know it, is an illusion. It is a construct created by the mind to organize and make sense of the world. But in the experience of stillness, time loses its grip. You no longer feel like you are running out of time, or that you are behind, or that you need to catch up. You simply are, and in that being, you find peace. This realization is both liberating and profound. When you stop identifying with the past and the future, you step out of the constant cycle of striving and worrying. You no longer live in reaction to the past or in anticipation of the future. Instead, you live in response to what is happening now. The present moment becomes your anchor, and in it you find the clarity, peace, and freedom that have always been available to you. But this shift doesn't come easily. The mind is conditioned to think in terms of time, and it will resist letting go of its constant need to evaluate, compare, and project. It will pull you back into stories about what has been or what will be. But with consistent practice, you begin to see the difference between the mind's activity and the peace that arises from simply being present. You start to recognize that your thoughts, while they may be loud, are not the truth. They are simply mental noise. When you stop identifying with them, when you stop engaging with them, you begin to experience the silence of the present. The more you practice returning to the present moment, the more natural it becomes. You start to recognize that peace is not something you need to search for. It's already within you, in the stillness of the present. You don't need to seek out happiness in the future, nor do you need to dwell on what went wrong in the past. All you need to do is be here, in this moment, fully present with yourself and the world around you. The shift from living in the past or future to living in the present is a profound one. It is a shift from suffering to peace. It is the realization that you don't need to constantly analyze, worry, or anticipate in order to be at peace. Peace exists in the present moment, and when you stop allowing your mind to pull you away from it, you begin to experience it more fully. This is where true healing begins. The mind's constant fixation on time, the past and the future, is a primary source of suffering. It creates a sense of separation from the present, from the peace that is always available. But in stillness, when you let go of time, you return to the truth of the present moment. It is in this space that suffering ceases. You no longer need to chase after something that is always just out of reach. You simply need to be here, now, and in that presence, you find all the peace and freedom you've been searching for. The more you experience this stillness, the more you begin to see how much of your suffering has been self-created. It is your attachment to time, to the past and the future, that keeps you locked in a cycle of anxiety and discontent. But when you release this attachment, you experience life as it truly is, unfiltered and undistorted by the mind's projections. The present moment becomes your source of peace, and in that peace you find the freedom to be fully alive. The end of mental time is not just a practice, but a realization that the present moment is all you need. You no longer need to chase after happiness or fulfillment, because they are already available to you, right here, right now. The more you allow yourself to be present, the more you realize that you've always had access to the peace you seek. It was always here, waiting for you to stop chasing after it and simply be still. And in that stillness, you find the end of suffering and the beginning of true peace. As you deepen your journey into stillness, something profound begins to unfold. With every quiet moment, the mind becomes less attached to the constant stream of thoughts that have defined your experience for so long. You begin to notice that the voice in your head, the one that has been giving you a sense of self, telling you who you are and what you need, starts to lose its grip. This voice, which has kept you bound to your ego for years, begins to soften, and in its silence, a deeper truth emerges. The more you sit in silence, the more you realize that the self you've known, the one shaped by thoughts, desires, and labels, is not who you truly are. It is merely a construction, a story the mind tells about itself. The ego, the part of you that believes it is separate from others, that judges, controls, and defines, begins to dissolve in the quiet. In this space of stillness, you start to experience a sense of wholeness that goes beyond the boundaries of your ego. This is the true nature of the self, one that is free from the suffering that the ego perpetuates. The ego is like a mask we wear every day. It tells us who we should be, what we should want, and how we should behave. It thrives on separation and comparison, constantly comparing us to others and telling us where we fit or don't fit in the world. But in silence, all of that dissolves. The need to prove, to compete, to be recognized starts to fade. You begin to understand that you don't need to be anything other than what you are in the present moment. The silence gives you the space to experience your true self beyond the stories and labels. This process of surrendering the self doesn't mean you lose your individuality or cease to be who you are. Rather, it means letting go of the false identities, the self-imposed limitations, and the judgments that keep you locked in a cycle of suffering. The ego, in its constant need to protect and define itself, creates a sense of separation from the world and from others. But in silence, you see that this separation is an illusion. The true self is not separate, but interconnected with all that is. It is a part of the whole, flowing with the rhythms of life, unbound by the rigid walls of the ego. As the ego dissolves, you become more attuned to your inner wisdom, the deeper intelligence that exists within all of us. The quiet mind is not empty. It is filled with insight, clarity, and peace. The silence allows you to listen, not just to your own thoughts, but to the subtle whispers of your true self, the part of you that has always known the truth, but has been overshadowed by the noise of the ego. In this space, you begin to experience a profound shift. The need to control, to assert yourself, to be right, starts to fade, and what emerges is a sense of ease, of flow with life. You no longer feel the need to cling to your self-image because you recognize that you are not that image. You are something deeper, something far more expansive. The ego's power lies in its ability to convince you that you are separate, that you are defined by your accomplishments, your status, your possessions, and your relationships. It keeps you constantly striving, constantly reaching for more, convinced that your worth is tied to what you achieve or what others think of you. But in the silence, you begin to see that this struggle is unnecessary. You are already whole, already enough. The ego doesn't need to fight for validation because the truth of who you are is inherent in your being. It doesn't require any external validation because it is not something that can be measured or defined. It simply is. When the ego dissolves, the mind becomes a clear channel, free of judgment, free of comparison. The constant internal dialogue that judges and categorizes everything fades. You stop trying to label your experiences as good or bad, right or wrong. You simply experience them as they are, without the filter of the ego's opinions. This shift is liberating. You no longer feel trapped by the need to perform, to meet expectations, or to fit into a certain mold. Instead, you start to embrace the fullness of your being, as it is, without the need to change it to meet some external standard. The ego often causes suffering because it creates a false sense of self, one that is fragile and constantly in need of protection. It is built on the idea of scarcity, of never being enough, of always needing more. This sense of lack fuels anxiety, fear, and insecurity. But when you sit in stillness, you realize that you are not separate from the world around you, and you are not lacking anything. The truth of the self is that it is already complete. It is whole, just as it is. The quiet mind reveals this truth, allowing you to experience a deep sense of peace that comes from knowing you don't need to be anything other than what you are in this moment. As the ego dissolves, you also begin to recognize that suffering is a result of attachment. The ego attaches itself to identities, roles, desires, and beliefs. It defines itself through its relationships, achievements, and possessions. But in silence, you see that attachment only leads to suffering. When you let go of your attachment to the ego, you let go of the need for validation, the need to prove yourself, the need to compare and compete. You begin to experience freedom from these attachments, and with that freedom comes a deep sense of peace. You no longer need to strive for something outside yourself, because you realize that everything you've been searching for has been within you all along. The surrender of the ego is not about losing yourself. It's about returning to your true self. It's about letting go of the false stories and identities that the ego has constructed over time. When the ego dissolves, you begin to see the world through the eyes of compassion, not judgment. You stop seeing others as separate from yourself, as competitors or threats. Instead, you see the interconnectedness of all things. The dissolution of the ego opens your heart to the world, to others, and to yourself. You begin to experience life without the filter of self-centeredness, and in doing so, you experience the depth of love, connection, and peace that transcends the limitations of the ego. This journey of surrender is not easy. The ego resists letting go because it has built its identity around control, security, and validation. But with patience, practice, and a willingness to step into the silence, the ego's grip begins to loosen. You begin to see that the more you let go of the ego, the more you align with your true self. The quiet mind is the doorway to this truth. In the silence, you find your essence, a part of you that is unchanging, unmovable, and free. The process of surrendering the self is a lifelong journey. It is not something that happens all at once, but rather something that deepens with each moment of stillness. The more you sit in silence, the more you begin to see the ego for what it is, a construct, a collection of thoughts, beliefs, and attachments that keep you bound to suffering. And as you let go of the need to defend, to protect, or to define yourself, you begin to experience the freedom that comes from simply being. You don't need to be anything more than you are in this moment. And in that realization, you find the peace that has always been within you. This awakening to your true nature is the end of suffering. It is the end of the ego's dominance over your life. When the ego dissolves, you return to the essence of who you are, free, whole, and at peace. In silence, you find the truth that has always been waiting for you. You are not your thoughts, your identity, or your achievements. You are something far greater, something beyond the ego's limitations. And when you surrender to this truth, you experience a profound sense of peace, love, and connection that transcends everything you once believed about yourself. As you move further into the practice of quieting the mind, a subtle but powerful shift begins to take place. You start to notice that the mind's constant noise, the never-ending stream of thoughts and distractions, has created a kind of clutter within. It's like a room filled with so many things that you can hardly move, let alone find clarity. This clutter isn't just external, it's mental. It fills the space of your mind, leaving little room for peace, wisdom, or insight. But when you allow yourself the space to truly be still, something remarkable happens. The clutter begins to dissolve, and in its place, there's an open, empty space where clarity and wisdom can arise. The miracle of inner space is one that most of us overlook. In our busy lives, we rarely stop to consider the mental clutter that fills every waking moment. Thoughts, judgments, worries, desires, they all contribute to the mental chaos that we live with. It's so constant, so ingrained in our daily experience that we think it's just how the mind works. We believe that constant mental activity is necessary for survival, for decision-making, or even for simply being productive. But when you step back and observe, you begin to realize that this clutter doesn't lead to productivity. It leads to exhaustion, confusion, and disconnection from the present moment. When the mind quiets, the clutter begins to clear, and a new kind of space opens up. This space is not empty in a meaningless way, but filled with potential, filled with wisdom. The more you allow this space to unfold, the more you realize that it is not a void, but a fertile ground for peace and clarity. It's in this empty space that you begin to hear the deeper truths that have always been there, waiting for you to listen. When the noise of the mind fades, the wisdom that resides within you becomes more accessible. This inner space, cultivated through the quieting of the mind, is essential for true healing. The clutter of the mind, filled with judgments, labels, expectations, and the constant pull of desires, prevents us from seeing things clearly. It creates a fog that clouds our perception, keeping us trapped in cycles of stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. But as you create more space within, you start to see more clearly. You become more aware of your inner world and the world around you. You begin to understand that the clutter you've been carrying is not essential to your being. It's just a collection of habits and thought patterns that you've picked up over time, but they don't define you. When you learn to quiet the mind, the clutter begins to melt away. The incessant need to control, to analyze, to judge everything and everyone starts to subside. This doesn't mean that you stop thinking altogether, but rather that you stop identifying with every thought that arises. You begin to see that thoughts are just thoughts, temporary and ever-changing. They don't define you, and they don't need to govern your life. When you create space between yourself and your thoughts, you give yourself the freedom to experience life without the burden of mental noise. This mental space doesn't just clear the way for peace, it also allows for insight. When the mind is quiet, the wisdom that resides within you comes to the surface. You begin to see things more clearly, without the filter of judgment or the distraction of constant thought. The quiet mind is like a clear pond. Only when the water settles do you begin to see the depth beneath. In the same way, when your mind settles, you begin to tap into a deeper well of wisdom that was always available, but was hidden beneath the constant rush of thoughts. The miracle of empty space is also deeply connected to the sense of presence. When the mind is cluttered, we are rarely present. We are either lost in the past or anticipating the future. We live in a mental world that exists outside of the present moment. But when you quiet the mind, you become more grounded in the here and now. You begin to fully experience what is happening around you without the distraction of mental clutter. This presence is not just a passive state. It's an active engagement with life as it is, without the need to manipulate, control, or judge. It's a freedom from the mental patterns that keep us from truly living. The more you cultivate this empty space within, the more you realize that it is in this space that true peace resides. Peace isn't something that you chase or try to force into your life. It's not an external condition or a result of achieving something. Peace is the natural state of mind when the clutter is cleared. When you let go of the constant mental chatter, you return to a state of inner balance and harmony. It is in the empty space that you find rest from the noise, from the struggle, from the effort to always be doing, thinking, planning. Another profound aspect of cultivating inner space is that it allows you to release attachments. Mental clutter is often fueled by attachment. Attachment to thoughts, desires, identities, and outcomes. We attach ourselves to our ideas of who we are, what we should be, and what we need to achieve. These attachments create suffering because they keep us trapped in an endless cycle of striving and grasping. But when the mind quiets, these attachments start to loosen their grip. The more space you create, the less attached you become to the things that once seemed so important. You begin to experience life without the constant pressure to control or manipulate it. You realize that you don't need to cling to anything because you are whole just as you are. In this space, you also begin to experience a deep sense of compassion, both for yourself and for others. The mental clutter that fills the mind often includes judgments about ourselves and others. We compare, we criticize, we judge based on external appearances or societal expectations. But when the mind quiets, these judgments fade. You begin to see others not through the lens of comparison or judgment, but through the lens of empathy and understanding. You begin to realize that we are all interconnected, all sharing the same human experience. In this space of stillness, compassion naturally arises because you are no longer clouded by the noise of your own thoughts. You see others as they truly are, and in doing so, you are able to see yourself more clearly as well. The practice of cultivating inner space is not just about quieting the mind for the sake of peace. It's about allowing yourself to live more fully, more consciously, and more connected to the world around you. It's about removing the barriers that prevent you from experiencing life as it is. As you quiet the mind and create more space, you begin to experience the world with a new sense of clarity and presence. You see things more clearly, you respond more thoughtfully, and you are no longer bogged down by the constant noise of your own mind. The miracle of empty space is that it opens the door to a life of greater freedom and wisdom. When the mind is cluttered, we are slaves to our thoughts. We are constantly reacting, judging, and trying to control. But when the clutter is cleared, we are free. We are free to experience life without the constant interference of the mind. We are free to live in alignment with our true nature, without the distractions of thought and judgment that keep us disconnected from our authentic self. And the more you allow yourself this space, the more you realize that peace and wisdom are not things you have to chase. They are always here, waiting for you to stop the mental noise and simply listen. The wisdom of the still mind is not about having all the answers. It's about experiencing life fully, without the need to analyze, judge, or control. It's about letting go of the need to constantly fill the space with thoughts and ideas. The more space you create, the more you will find that peace and clarity are not things you acquire. They are simply revealed when you make room for them. In this space, you find healing. The clutter of the mind creates stress, anxiety, and confusion. But when the mind quiets, the space for healing opens up. The constant mental noise has been preventing you from truly healing. But when you allow the mind to settle, you make space for the natural healing that arises from within. You reconnect with your true self, the part of you that is always whole, always at peace, and always connected to the wisdom of the universe. This is the miracle of empty space. It is not just the absence of thought, it is the presence of everything you need to live a life of peace, wisdom, and fulfillment. As you continue to quiet the mind and create space within, another layer of insight begins to emerge. The realization that you are not your thoughts, your emotions, or the stories you've been telling yourself. The more you let go of mental clutter, the more you come to understand that your true self exists beyond the thoughts and emotions that constantly arise. There is a deeper place within you, a space of stillness, where you can observe without getting caught in the drama of your mind. This shift from being consumed by thoughts and feelings to becoming the silent observer is a profound practice that holds the key to true freedom. It is a practice that allows you to witness life as it unfolds, without attachment, without identification, and without the grip of suffering. The concept of the silent observer is deceptively simple, yet incredibly powerful. It's about stepping back and witnessing the flow of thoughts, emotions, and experiences without getting swept up in them. When you stop identifying with your thoughts or emotions, they lose their power over you. You are no longer controlled by the past or future, no longer swept away by the constant fluctuations of the mind. Instead, you become the quiet witness, the one who observes, without judgment or attachment. This process is liberating because it removes the need to react to every thought or emotion that arises. Most of us live in reaction to our thoughts and emotions, letting them dictate our actions, our mood, and our overall experience of life. We identify with our thoughts and emotions as if they define who we are. We believe that if we are angry, we are anger. If we are sad, we are sadness. But the practice of becoming the silent observer teaches us that we are not our thoughts or emotions. We are the awareness that notices them, the space in which they arise and pass. This simple shift in perspective is where true freedom begins. When you observe your thoughts and emotions without getting entangled in them, they begin to lose their hold over you. You no longer react impulsively, automatically, to the thoughts that arise in your mind. You stop identifying with the stories that your mind tells about who you are, what you've done, or what might happen next. Instead, you see your thoughts as they are, just thoughts. And in this observation, you create a distance between yourself and your mind. You stop being at the mercy of your thoughts and start living from a place of clarity, of inner peace. The silent observer is not passive or detached in a way that disconnects you from life. On the contrary, it allows you to engage with life more fully, without the interference of constant mental noise. When you are able to witness your thoughts and emotions without attachment, you experience life in a more grounded and present way. You don't need to react to every feeling, every thought, or every impulse. Instead, you simply observe and allow things to unfold without judgment or control. You begin to live in alignment with the present moment, free from the distractions of your mind. This practice also teaches you to be less judgmental, not only of your thoughts and emotions, but also of others. When you stop identifying with your own thoughts and emotions, you become more aware of the ways in which you judge others. You begin to recognize that everyone is operating from their own thoughts, their own stories, and their own emotions. The silent observer allows you to let go of the need to judge others, to label them or put them in boxes. You begin to see them as they are, human beings just like you, with their own struggles and experiences. This shift fosters compassion and understanding, as you no longer need to judge others in order to feel better about yourself. The silent observer also brings a deep sense of peace. When you are constantly caught in your thoughts and emotions, there is no room for peace. You are always reacting, always trying to control or change things. But when you step back and become the observer, you allow the natural flow of life to unfold without interference. You stop trying to control your thoughts, emotions, and experiences, and in doing so, you create space for peace to enter. You begin to realize that peace is not something you need to achieve, but something that is always available to you when you stop identifying with the constant noise of the mind. The more you practice becoming the silent observer, the more you begin to see the impermanence of all things. Thoughts and emotions are like clouds. They come and go, changing shape and form, but never staying for long. When you observe them from a place of stillness, you begin to see that they are not permanent, nor are they the truth of who you are. They are simply passing phenomena, arising and dissolving in the field of awareness. And when you realize that thoughts and emotions are not fixed, you stop clinging to them. You stop holding on to anger, sadness, or fear because you see that they are not permanent. You begin to experience a deep sense of freedom, knowing that whatever you are feeling or thinking will eventually pass. This practice also brings an awareness of the stories the mind tells. The mind is always creating narratives about who you are, about what has happened, and what will happen. These stories can shape your reality, making you believe things about yourself and the world that are not true. But when you become the silent observer, you begin to see these stories for what they are, just stories. They are not the truth of who you are. They are just the mind's attempt to make sense of the world. And when you stop identifying with these stories, you let go of the need to define yourself by them. You begin to experience life as it is, free from the narratives that once dictated your reality. The process of becoming the silent observer is not about suppressing or rejecting your thoughts and emotions. It's about creating space for them to exist without attaching to them, without becoming entangled in them. It's about seeing them clearly, without judgment, without trying to control or change them. This practice teaches you to simply be with what is, without needing to react, without needing to make things different. In this space of non-attachment, you begin to experience true peace, a peace that comes from simply being with life as it is. One of the most profound aspects of this practice is its ability to dissolve the ego. The ego thrives on identification. It identifies with thoughts, emotions, experiences, and roles. It says, "I am my thoughts," or "I am my feelings," or "I am my past." But when you become the silent observer, you begin to see that the ego is not who you are. The ego is just a collection of thoughts and stories, a mental construct that you have identified with. But when you step back and witness your thoughts and emotions without attachment, the ego begins to lose its grip. You stop identifying with it, and in doing so, you dissolve it. What remains is the true self, silent, still, and aware. This is the essence of who you are, beyond the ego's need to define, control, and separate. The more you cultivate this practice, the more you experience a sense of inner freedom. You stop being trapped by the fluctuations of your mind. You stop being at the mercy of every passing thought or emotion. Instead, you become the observer, the one who watches, without getting caught up in the drama. In this space of stillness, you experience life with greater clarity, peace, and wisdom. You begin to realize that you don't need to identify with your thoughts or emotions to be whole. You are already whole, already complete, and in this recognition, you find freedom from suffering. The practice of becoming the silent observer is a lifelong journey. It is not something that can be mastered overnight. But with patience, practice, and awareness, you begin to shift from being identified with your thoughts and emotions to being the one who observes them. As you continue on this path, you begin to experience more peace, more freedom, and more clarity. You begin to live life from a place of deep presence, no longer governed by the mental chatter and emotional turbulence that once defined your reality. In the silence of the observer, you discover the true peace that has always been within you, waiting for you to notice. As you continue to cultivate the practice of silent observation, you begin to see how much of your mental energy has been consumed by the constant desire to know, to label, to judge, to understand, to control. These are the impulses that drive the mind, keeping it in a perpetual state of striving. We live in a world that values certainty, knowledge, and answers. Yet, with each answer the mind seeks, a new question arises, creating an endless loop of mental activity. But what happens when you let go of the need to know, when you release the constant pressure to understand everything around you? A profound freedom emerges, one that lies in embracing the unknown, in surrendering to the mystery of life. The need to know is deeply ingrained in our culture and in our personal lives. From the moment we are born, we are taught to seek answers. We seek to understand, to make sense of everything. But in doing so, we create mental boxes, constantly trying to fit the world into our limited understanding. We label people, situations, and experiences according to our beliefs, expectations, and past experiences. This mental labeling creates separation, division, and a sense of control that is not only exhausting but limiting. When you begin to quiet the mind, you start to see that the need to know is not a natural state of being. It is a mental construct, a learned behavior. In fact, the mind's obsession with knowing is often what keeps us stuck. It is the need for certainty, the desire to categorize, to judge, and to label that creates mental tension and suffering. When we constantly feel the pressure to understand everything, to figure things out, we miss the beauty of life's mystery. We become so caught up in the need for answers that we forget to simply experience the present moment as it is. This is where the liberation of not knowing comes in. When you allow yourself to let go of the need to know, something remarkable happens. The mind begins to quiet, and the weight of expectation lifts. You stop trying to force everything into a neat box, and instead, you create the space to simply be. In this space, there is room for mystery, for curiosity, and for true freedom. When you embrace the unknown, you no longer feel the need to control or predict what will happen next. You are no longer trying to fix or change things. You are simply present, open to whatever arises. One of the most profound shifts that occur when you let go of the need to know is that you begin to release judgment. The mind is constantly judging yourself, others, situations, experiences. This judgment is a way of mentally organizing the world, but it is also a source of suffering. We judge because we feel the need to categorize and label, to determine what is good or bad, right or wrong. But when you release this need to judge, you free yourself from the mental prison that judgment creates. You no longer need to define everything, to place it into boxes of this is good or this is bad. You begin to see things as they are without the overlay of judgment. This freedom from judgment also extends to how you see yourself. When the mind is constantly trying to understand, explain, or define who you are, it creates an image, a concept of the self that is narrow and limiting. But when you let go of this need to define yourself, you allow yourself to simply be. You stop comparing yourself to others. Stop trying to fit into a specific mold, and instead, you accept yourself as you are without the need to label or categorize. The liberation of not knowing frees you from the constant mental effort of trying to be something you are not. You begin to experience your true self, not as a fixed identity, but as an ever-changing, evolving being in the present moment. The mind, in its attempt to control and understand, often prevents you from experiencing life fully. It constantly filters experiences through the lens of past conditioning, fears, desires, and expectations. This mental filtering distorts reality, preventing you from seeing things as they truly are. But when you let go of the need to know, to judge, or to label, you begin to see life through clearer eyes. You stop trying to fit everything into a mental framework and instead allow yourself to experience life directly without the distortion of thought. The liberation of not knowing also creates space for deeper wisdom. When the mind is filled with the need to control and understand, there is little room for true insight to arise. The wisdom that comes from quieting the mind is not intellectual, it is intuitive. It is the wisdom that arises when you stop relying on mental concepts and instead tune into the deeper currents of awareness that exist beyond thought. This wisdom is not something you can learn or grasp through effort. It is something that comes to you when you stop trying to force answers and simply allow the flow of life to guide you. It is a wisdom that transcends the need for certainty, the need to be right, the need to know. By embracing the unknown, you also let go of the need to control the outcomes of your life. When you are constantly trying to predict or control what will happen next, you miss out on the spontaneity and beauty of life as it unfolds. You become so attached to specific outcomes that you lose sight of the journey. But when you release the need to know, you allow life to unfold naturally. You become more open to the unexpected, more willing to embrace what comes your way without resistance. In this openness, you find peace because you are no longer fighting against the flow of life. One of the most liberating aspects of this mindset is that it allows you to live without fear. Fear often arises from the mind's need to predict and control. We fear the unknown. We fear what we cannot understand, and we fear what we cannot control. But when you let go of the need to know, fear begins to lose its grip. You no longer feel the need to anticipate every possible outcome, to plan for every possible scenario. You simply trust in the process of life, knowing that whatever comes your way, you will be able to handle it. This trust in life, in its inherent mystery, frees you from the constant tension that fear creates. The liberation of not knowing also allows you to let go of perfectionism. The desire to know, to control, and to understand everything often leads to a need for perfection. We believe that if we can just figure things out, if we can just understand the right way to do things, then everything will fall into place. But this quest for perfection only leads to frustration and disappointment. The truth is, life is not perfect, and there is no right way to do things. When you let go of the need to know, you also let go of the need to be perfect. You begin to accept yourself and others as they are, without the need to impose an ideal standard. This acceptance brings freedom because you no longer feel the pressure to be something you are not. When you release the need to know, you also begin to let go of your attachments. Attachment is rooted in the desire to control, to cling to specific outcomes, to hold on to what we believe we need. But when you embrace the unknown, you release the need for attachment. You allow yourself to move through life without the weight of clinging to things, to people, or to outcomes. You understand that nothing is permanent, and everything is in a state of constant change. This understanding frees you from the grip of attachment, and in this freedom you find peace. The liberation of not knowing is ultimately about surrender. It is about surrendering the need to control, to understand, and to define. It is about allowing life to unfold as it will, trusting that you don't need to know everything in order to experience peace. The more you let go of this need, the more space you create for wisdom, clarity, and inner peace to arise. You no longer need to rely on the mind's constant analysis and judgments. Instead, you trust in the flow of life, knowing that the answers you seek will arise when you stop looking for them. In embracing the mystery of life, you begin to experience a deeper sense of freedom. You stop living in reaction to the need for answers and start living in alignment with the present moment. You stop seeking certainty and begin to embrace the beauty of uncertainty. In doing so, you free yourself from the mental constraints that once defined your existence. The liberation of not knowing is the freedom to be fully present, to experience life without the pressure of always needing to understand it. And in this freedom, you find peace. As you continue to explore the profound peace that comes from quieting the mind and releasing attachments, a deeper realization begins to emerge. The more you let go of your need to control, to understand, and to define, the more you begin to recognize the root of your suffering, desire. In the stillness, when the mind is no longer racing after thoughts, plans, and expectations, you start to see just how much your desires drive your suffering. These desires, often subtle and ingrained in your daily life, keep you trapped in cycles of wanting, chasing, and never truly being satisfied. The Buddhist practice of letting go teaches us that it is not the world itself, but our attachment to desires that causes pain. And when you learn to let go of desire, silence becomes a profound gateway to freedom. The art of letting go is deeply embedded in Buddhist teachings. Desire, according to Buddhism, is the root cause of suffering. The mind is constantly in pursuit of something, whether it's material possessions, achievements, approval, or even emotional fulfillment. But no matter how much we attain, there is always more to desire. The cycle is endless, and with each new desire, there is always a sense of lack, a feeling that we are not yet complete, not yet whole. This endless striving, this constant reaching for something outside of ourselves, is the very thing that keeps us from finding peace. It is this cycle of desire that traps us in an illusion of incompleteness. When the mind is still, when it is quieted from its usual chatter, the underlying patterns of desire become clear. These desires often appear as natural parts of life, as normal human impulses. But in the silence, you begin to see how much of your energy is consumed by wanting things, wanting approval, wanting control. This wanting is the source of your dissatisfaction, your frustration, your anxiety. No matter how much you gain, it never seems to be enough, because desire is always one step ahead, creating a never-ending sense of longing. The Buddha's teachings emphasize that it is not the desires themselves that create suffering, but the attachment to them. Desire, in and of itself, is a natural part of being human. We all desire things. It's a fundamental aspect of our existence. But when we attach to these desires, when we believe that we need them in order to be happy, we create a mental prison. We begin to define ourselves by what we want, by what we have, and by what we lack. The mind becomes obsessed with these desires, and in doing so, it blocks us from experiencing life as it is, in its full richness. In stillness, you begin to see that desires are transient. They come and go, just like thoughts and emotions. They are not permanent, and they do not define you. When you quiet the mind, you realize that desire is just another passing phenomenon, something that arises and fades, like a wave in the ocean. The moment you stop identifying with desire, the moment you let go of the attachment to what you want, you free yourself from its grip. This letting go is not about suppressing desire or rejecting it. It's about releasing the attachment to it. When you no longer cling to your desires, you experience freedom. The craving that once drove your actions, your thoughts, and your emotions begins to dissolve.